Alright, so I have finally made my video on the Happymodel Mobula8 O3 Edition, and in fact this is the O3 Lite Edition, and it's noted here on the box, it says O3 Lite, and that's because it does not come with the O3 air unit pre-installed. There is a version that comes with the O3 air unit pre-installed that of course costs quite a bit more, but if you have your own O3 air unit or you want to just install it yourself, they have this version where you have to install it, and then you have basically the bind and fly version. But I just want to disclose that this is not the bind and fly version with the O3 air unit pre-installed, so keep that in mind. If you happen to buy the one with the O3 air unit pre-installed, it's going to be a little bit different from this one, and I'll point out some of the minor changes that I've made. It does come supplied with these whip antennas, which you have to use here. I suppose you could use the stock antenna if you wanted to, but it's better to use the whip antennas just to keep the weight down. And this the reason I took so long to make this video is because I waited for the final version to come out with this. Basically, this is the injection molded cage that holds the O3 air unit, and this is the production version is much better than the I guess the pre-production sample that I was given. So here is what the pre-production version looked like. It's very flimsy. It's like 3D printed, and in fact, it exploded on a very minor crash, more like a hard landing. So I elected to not even bother making a video on the pre-production version because it doesn't reflect what you guys are going to be buying. And so yeah, lately I know there's a lot of the other channels, they're trying to get their videos out as soon as possible, but I'm kind of getting out of that game now. Just put the video out when it does. And I know that most of you guys aren't watching the videos because you've already seen from this particular model from another channel, and that's fine. But you know, hopefully for those of you that want specific information that findings that I found out about this particular model, you know, hopefully you guys will watch the video when it comes out, because generally speaking, I'm not going to be putting out my videos as soon as possible. If I can, I will, but in this case I'm not able to because I didn't want to put out a video where it's not going to reflect what you're going to be buying, which is kind of pointless. Anyway, the injection molded cage here is definitely a lot tougher. I did have some harder landings in this one, no problems. It did not explode, did not break up, and they do give you a spare in case it does. But this is not a bando basher, so if you're going to be thinking this is going to survive some you know, full speed 50-mile-an-hour crashes into a brick wall, this is going to break for sure, because it's not. While it is stronger than the 3D printed version, it's not going to survive an extremely hard crash. Now, the O3 air units are pretty tough. They are going to hold up in a lot of crashes. I've already seen a lot of evidence of that from the community, but the lens is the thing that's going to break. So I highly recommend that you pick up these camera butter UV filters and put this on here. This does not come with the kit. You have to buy them in this like pack of 2 here. It comes in this case for the O3 unit. Of course, you can buy the ND filters as well, but of course I never review this with the ND filters, so you can see the jello, and there, yes, there is definitely jello. I will talk about this in as compares to the Pavo Pico as well a little bit later in the video, because I'm sure a lot of you are wondering what the differences are, because they are somewhat similar, but actually they're quite a bit different. Anyway, what Happymodel has done here is they have elected to hard mount the cage with the O3 air unit and the camera to the frame, so there's going to be a fair amount of vibrations that come through. I guess the original screws that come in here to mount this cage to the frame is a lot shorter, and there's a nut on this side over here, and I actually did fly it with the stock screw and had the cage mounted directly to the frame, but there was a fair amount of jello, like quite a bit, and so what I did was I put a longer screw in here with there's a little rubber washer right there that does dampen the vibrations a little bit between this cage and the frame. It's a little bit better, but it's not like it doesn't make a huge difference. You still see some jello, and I did put them on all 4 screws with some longer screws. But keep in mind that this nut here is not a locking nut, and you do need to check to make sure that this is not getting loose over time, and because you will lose this, and because it's not a locking nut. It's basically it's the nut there is kind of wedged in the plastic so that it doesn't spin, but is not a locking nut. So if you want to make sure the nut doesn't fall out, I would recommend putting maybe a little bit of glue on where the nut and the screw is there, just to prevent it from spinning, because the vibrations will cause it to loosen up, and then once that happens, once the screw loosens up, this nut will fall out, and then that section will no longer be secure, and the whole cage could just fall off. Now, getting the O3 ear unit inside this cage was pretty challenging. It has some flex, and you want to flex it in this direction here, front to back. You have to be really careful not to damage the video cable that goes in this little notch here, because if you force it and press on the wires too much and not have it properly centered, you can damage that cable. So something to keep in mind. It's not going, you're not going to be able to see. It's not going to show up here, but basically the cable comes out of it's on the bottom side of the O3 ear unit, and it comes up. And so the cable will bend up, and then that little notch right here is holding the center part of that cable in place, and then the wire comes up. But you do want to be really careful about that. Also, the antennas coming through here in the back, also it's a very tight fit. It comes in at a little bit of an angle like that. They do include some heat shrink on here, which does help so that this doesn't break. But you just still want to be very careful when you pop that in, because you're going to basically slide it in, the O3 ear unit in from underneath. And so those are the two things that are the most challenging in terms of the build. Obviously, you're going to have this cable that's included, that's already installed on the connector right there on the flight controller, and then you just have to pop that in over there. It's also kind of tricky to get that in as well. I put the O3 ear unit in first and then try to get that cable in, although you might want to connect the cable first to the O3 unit and then install it to the cage. That might be a little bit easier, but I forgot to plug that in first, and then I had to kind of sneak it in the back here behind the O3 unit and then plug it in. It was a little bit tricky, but I was able to manage that. But it might be a little bit easier to plug it in first and then stick the O3 unit inside there, and then you can use the screws to screw it down. This particular version comes with an Express LRS receiver. It's like version 3 firmware. I obviously switched mine over to the DJI Remote 2, and then when you do that, you have to switch to UART. I believe it's UART 6 that you have to switch it to. That's on for the S-Bus connection. I'm sorry, it's UART. I believe it's UART 1. It was on UART 2 for Express LRS, and then UART 1 is the S-Bus connection for this particular board. And that was it, because it comes defaulted to Express LRS. It does have that little antenna right there, and I just shoved it in behind this little side plate here. Another thing to note is, because of the way this cage is and where the camera is, the ducts do show up in the bottom of the video at this particular angle. So if you don't want the ducts to show up, you just have to tilt it up some more so you get more angle on the camera. Of course, that's going to mean that you're going to be generally flying a lot faster. So if you want to fly nice and slow and have this nice and level, then your ducts are going to show up in your video. So regarding this versus the Pavo Pico in terms of cinematic footage, if you're going to be flying it slow, you're going to have your prop guards in view, and generally speaking, people don't want that in their videos. So this would obviously not be the best drone for that particular use case. Anyway, in terms of the rest of the components, I believe the flight controller is the same as the one that was on the Walksnail that I reviewed a few weeks ago. So there's really no differences there. I think it's a 12 amp ESC. I think it's an F405. The motors, I believe, are also the same. These are like 1103 motors, 11,000 kV, and the same 2-inch props and the same frame. I do have the HD0 version as well, and I will have that video out a bit later. Again, as I mentioned, I'm not in a big rush to pump out the videos as soon as stuff comes out. I do want to, properly test it and make sure that I found all the things that need to be talked about. As I mentioned in the video with the walk snail, with this frame here, this battery tray is very tough to get the battery in there. I did use this 2S450, same battery as before. It's an XT30 connection. So you do have to kind of stuff it in here, and then you're gonna have to sort of bend the frame up a little bit, because these parts of the prop guard get in the way of the battery, and you can see that right there. If I line that up like that, so it does kind of push the prop guards up a little bit when you shove the battery all the way through, but it's never going to fall out. It's very, very tough to get it in. But this is the battery I use. It's a GMB 450 2S high volt, and I get roughly 3.5 minutes of flight time on average. Of course, it depends on the flying conditions, if you have more wind, less wind, etc., and how aggressively you're flying. And if you're just kind of cruising around, you can probably stretch it out to maybe 4.5 minutes. If you're more aggressive on the throttle, you're going to get less flight time, maybe 3 or 2.5 minutes. It really depends on how you're flying. In the box, you do get spare parts, of course, and a spare set of props and a whole bunch of nuts and screws, and you get a screwdriver. So in case you do lose some of those nuts, spares are included. Alright, so here's how much it weighs. No battery, coming in at 82.5 grams, and then with the 2S450 coming in at 111 grams. Alright, so how does this compare to the Pavo Pico? That's a question a lot of people are going to be wondering about, and it boils down to the fact that you have a bigger prop and a bigger motor. Actually a much bigger motor on the Mobula8, so much more power, much more acro ability, and on the Pavo Pico you have a 45mm prop with an 1102 motor, so not as much power, but the mounting of the camera is better on the Pavo Pico, and it's also more forward, so the prop guards don't get in view of your video. It is vibration dampened, so if you're looking for more cinematic type of video, like real estate type shoots, or just flying around people and flying slow, then I think that the Pavo Pico is going to be the one you want, especially if you don't want prop guards in your view. If you're looking for something more acrobatic, a lot more power, more freestyle ability, now the Pavo Pico still has freestyle ability, but it's not as much as the bigger motor and bigger prop of the Mobula8 O3. So it really kind of boils down to what your priorities are. If you're looking for something a little bit more slow, better video footage with less jello, the Pavo Pico is what you're going to be looking for. If you don't care so much about the jello and you want more power and just more freestyle ability, and just generally a lot more acro ability, then the Mobula8 O3 is going to be your drone of choice. Anyway, I'll put the 4K footage that I got here, which unstabilized, so you'll see basically all of the jitters and everything. That'll be linked down in the video description. You can watch that in full screen if you want to see the jello in full detail. Basically, there's really no way around it. It's there. It's just because it's the way it's designed. That's the way it's mounted. There's not much you can do about that, and if you're okay with that, but you want more power and more freestyle acro ability, then yeah, this is the way to go. All right, so I'll have the HD0 version of this model out, that video out a little bit later, so stay tuned to this channel for that. That'll cover for this video. Talk to you guys in the next one.